The cold wind sliced through my coat as I stepped out of the rental car. A bleak Chicago December day. I adjusted the scarf my mother had sent me, a stark white against my all-black attire. It felt like a uniform for a funeral, not a Christmas homecoming. The familiar suburban house stood before me, draped in twinkling lights and a large wreath on the door. It was a picture of festive cheer, a perfect facade I was about to shatter. I hadn't wanted to come. My father's call had been persistent, a series of voicemails filled with a desperate cheerfulness that grated on my nerves. "It's been too long, Sarah. We really want you here." He made it sound like a wish, but I heard it as an order. The last time I saw him was 2 years ago, and we'd left things in a state of icy silence. Time hadn't thawed anything. If anything, the distance had just hardened my resolve. I had a life in New York now, a promising career as a graphic designer, but none of it felt like the dream I'd wanted, and I knew who to blame for that. When he opened the door, his face lit up with a smile that looked both practiced and genuine. His hair was grayer, and the lines around his eyes were deeper. "Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so glad you came for Christmas." I just nodded, a tight, forced smile on my face. The weight of his words felt like a physical burden. He embraced me, a warm hug that felt suffocating. I didn't hug back. Inside, a little voice whispered that this was the beginning of my reckoning. He thought this was a reunion, but I knew it was a reckoning. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, the kind of cozy, comforting scent that always felt fake to me. My mother, Maria, rushed out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, Sarah, you made it." Her hug was softer, more tentative than my father's, as if she could feel the wall I'd built. My younger brother, Tom, a perpetually good-natured guy, just gave me a wave from the living room couch. "Hey, sis. Long time." His voice was casual, but his eyes held a hint of concern. They knew. They all knew the tension that pulsed between my father and me. Dinner was a chore. My father tried to make small talk, asking about my job and my apartment. I gave monosyllabic answers, deflecting his questions like a game of conversational dodgeball. "The city must be a change from here," he offered, his tone hopeful. I just shrugged. "It is what it is." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Maria tried to fill the void, talking about Tom's new job and the neighbors' holiday decorations. It felt like she was trying to bandage a wound that was bleeding out on the dining room table. Later, I retreated to my old bedroom, a sanctuary of my past. My father came to the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Look, Sarah," he began, his voice low. "Can we just talk? The past is the past." The words felt like a match dropped into a pool of gasoline. My jaw tightened. "The past isn't the past, Dad," I said, not looking at him. "It's why I'm here. It's why you're here. It's why we're all here, pretending this is a family." He stood there for a long moment, a defeated look on his face, before quietly closing the door. The true beginning of my resentment wasn't an event, but a conversation, one that happened years ago on this very street, under a gray sky. I was 18, accepted into the Rhode Island School of Design. Art was my passion, my escape. I had spent countless hours in my room, sketching, painting, and dreaming of a life creating beautiful things. The acceptance letter felt like validation, a key to a world where I belonged. But there was the issue of tuition. My father, a man of numbers and pragmatism, sat me down at the dining room table. "Sarah, this is a wonderful school," he said, the words sounding hollow. "But it's a gamble. A fine arts degree, it's a risk. A huge risk." He pulled out a spreadsheet. The numbers were brutal. He showed me the cost, the student loans, and the slim job prospects for a fine artist. He had a backup plan, an alternative. "Your grades in math and science are excellent. The city college has an incredible engineering program. It's affordable, and there's a guaranteed job after graduation." His voice was calm, but his words were a cold shower on my dreams. I begged. I cried. I showed him my portfolio, but he was unmoved. "I'm a father, Sarah. It's my job to make sure you have a secure future, not just a fantasy." In that moment, he didn't see an artist. He saw a liability. I never forgave him for that. I went to the city college, I got the engineering degree, and I got the job. I built a life that was stable, predictable, and soul-crushingly empty. The design career I pursued in my free time was just a hobby, a reminder of what he had taken from me. And now, I was home, ready to make him understand the cost of his pragmatism. Christmas Eve was always the most magical night of the year in our house, but this time, it was laced with a palpable tension. My mother was a whirlwind of motion in the kitchen, preparing our favorite holiday dishes. Tom had brought his new girlfriend, Lisa, a sweet and naive woman who clearly didn't understand the family dynamics. She kept trying to make me laugh, but her jokes felt like tiny pebbles hitting a stone wall. My father was in the den, trying to distract himself with the news, his shoulders hunched. I had been planning this for weeks. It wasn't about a fleeting moment of anger. It was about a statement. I had come prepared, a small flash drive hidden in my purse. I had dug up some old documents from my parents' office, a few emails my father had sent to his business partners from that time. They were mundane, talking about investments and stock options, but they were the key to my plan. He had invested a significant amount of money in his company's stock around the time I was applying to art school, money he could have used to help me. I saw it as a calculated choice, a clear message that his financial security was more important than my dreams. He came over to me as I sat by the fireplace, staring into the dancing flames. "I know things are rough between us, Sarah," he said quietly, his voice full of a weary sincerity. He held out a small, wrapped box. "I got you something. It's a little late, but I think you'll like it." I looked at the box, then at him, a flicker of something close to pity in his eyes. I wanted to believe him, but the old anger was a habit, a constant companion. I took the box without a word. I knew my chance was coming, and I was going to take it. Christmas morning felt like the calm before the storm. The house was filled with the sounds of wrapping paper being torn, and the laughter of my mother and Tom. We opened gifts, and I managed to feign a smile when I saw my father's present, a brand new high-end set of art pencils and a sketchbook. My heart ached, a sharp, quick pain, but I pushed it down. It was too little, too late. The main event was Christmas dinner. The table was set for 10. My aunt, uncle, and cousins had arrived, their cheerful energy a jarring contrast to my simmering rage. Everyone was eating, drinking, and laughing. My father stood up, raising his glass. "I just want to say," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "how much it means to me to have everyone here, especially my family. Thank you all for coming." The love and warmth in his eyes as he looked at my mother and Tom was genuine. When his gaze landed on me, it was filled with a hope that I knew I was about to extinguish. I stood up, holding my glass. A few people looked at me, surprised. I smiled sweetly. "A toast," I said, my voice clear and cutting through the din. "To family, and to honesty." I paused for effect. When I was 18, I was told that my dreams were too expensive. I was told that some things are a bad investment. I looked directly at my father. His smile faltered. I just found out that at the exact same time, my father invested thousands of dollars in his company's stock, gambling on his own future, while telling me mine was a risk not worth taking. The laughter died. The clinking of silverware stopped. A silence, so heavy it was like a physical blow, fell over the room. His face went white. The hope was gone, replaced by a deep, shattering pain. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. My aunt gasped. My mother dropped her napkin, a quiet sound that echoed in the stunned room. My father, the life and soul of the family, simply sat back down, his shoulders slumping. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The look on his face said everything. The festive atmosphere I had worked so hard to destroy was gone, replaced by a cold, thick misery. Tom stood up, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell, Sarah? Why would you do that?" he hissed, his voice low and furious. I just shrugged, a defensive gesture. "He deserves to know how I feel," I said, my voice trembling slightly, but my resolve holding fast. My mother put her hand on my father's arm, her eyes filled with tears as she tried to comfort him. My cousins and their parents started to make their excuses, gathering their coats and saying quick, awkward goodbyes. The party was over. I retreated to my room, feeling a brief, hollow sense of victory. I had said my piece. I had made him feel a fraction of the pain he had caused me. But the feeling was fleeting. The silence of the house felt different now. It wasn't just a quiet home. It was a home broken by my actions. I sat on my bed, staring at the gift he had given me, the art supplies. He had tried, in his own way, to make things right, but my anger was so deep, it had blinded me to any sign of his regret. All I could see was the past, and my actions had just guaranteed there would be no future. The morning after Christmas was somber. The winter sun, weak and pale, cast long shadows across the living room. My mother found me in the kitchen making a cup of tea. She didn't look at me, just kept her gaze on her hands as she washed a few stray dishes. "You really hurt him, Sarah," she said, her voice soft but full of a weary disappointment. "Do you have any idea why he did that? Why he invested that money?" I shook my head, my jaw tight. "I don't care. It doesn't matter." She stopped what she was doing and finally looked at me, her eyes red from crying. "It matters. It matters to him, and it should matter to you. At that time we were struggling, Sarah. Your father's company was on the brink of collapse. That investment he made was his entire life savings, a last-ditch effort to save his job, to keep a roof over our heads. He took a huge risk because he had no other choice. My world tilted on its axis. He hadn't been selfish. He had been desperate. He had been trying to protect us, to protect the very home I had just tried to burn down. He didn't tell you because he didn't want you to worry," my mother continued, her voice breaking. "He didn't want you to see him fail. And your father, he didn't want to tell you how worried he was that your art degree wouldn't be enough to support you, not because he didn't believe in your talent, but because he knew what it was like to face failure. He was protecting you the only way he knew how." Her words were a blow to my core, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. My righteous anger felt petty, cruel, and completely unfounded. I left a few hours later. The goodbye was as quiet as my arrival had been. My mother gave me a hug, a silent farewell that felt final. Tom just nodded from the couch, his face grim. My father was in the garage, supposedly fixing something. He didn't come out to see me off. I didn't blame him. I wouldn't have come out to see me off either. The drive back to Chicago was a blur. The snow started to fall, heavy and thick, covering the road in a blanket of white. It was a perfect metaphor for the way my life felt right then. A blank, empty space. A cold, desolate landscape. I got back to my apartment. My friends had been texting, excited to hear about my Christmas. I lied, telling them it was great, that it was so good to see my family. The lie felt like a lead weight in my stomach. I looked around my beautifully decorated, perfectly organized apartment. It was filled with all the things I thought I wanted. Success, stability, independence. But it felt empty. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I tried to sketch, to lose myself in the art that I had fought so hard to protect, but the page was blank. My hands shook. The bitterness that had fueled me for years had vanished, leaving me with nothing but a raw, aching guilt. I picked up my phone and saw a new text from Tom. It was a simple picture. My father, sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring into space. The image was devastating. He looked so small, so broken. I had done that. I had broken him with my words. I tried to call him, but the call went straight to voicemail. "Hey, Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "It's me. Just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything." I hung up, tears streaming down my face. My revenge had cost me everything. My life, which had felt so perfectly constructed, started to unravel. The bitterness that had been a part of my identity for so long had been ripped away, and without it, I felt lost. The friends I had confided in about my awful father started to distance themselves. My best friend Maya confronted me over coffee. "Sarah, what you did was cruel," she said, her voice firm. "I get that you were hurt, but you didn't just hurt him. You hurt your entire family. And for what? So you could feel a little better?" I had no answer. Her words were a mirror, and I didn't like the reflection. I tried to call my parents again, and again, my calls went unanswered. My brother would reply to my texts with brief, one-word answers. They needed space, and I had no right to demand forgiveness. The city, which had always felt like a sanctuary, now felt cold and impersonal. Every time I passed a father and daughter holding hands, or saw a family laughing together, a sharp pain would shoot through my chest. The stable, predictable life I had built felt like a cage. I had sacrificed genuine connection for a false sense of independence and control. The artistic freedom I so desperately wanted had become a burden. I couldn't create because my heart felt heavy and hollow. The true consequence wasn't some external punishment. It wasn't a lost job or a broken relationship with a boyfriend. It was the internal isolation, the loneliness that came with the knowledge that I had pushed away the very people who loved me. My victory had tasted like ashes, and now, the regret was a constant, suffocating cloud. I had spent so much time being angry at my father that I hadn't noticed he was trying to love me, trying to reconnect. My bitterness had become a shield, and now I was left with a gaping wound I had inflicted upon myself. The snow had started to melt, leaving behind gray, slushy piles on the sidewalks. It had been weeks since I had spoken to my family. The silence was deafening. I sat at my desk, looking at the art supplies my father had given me. They were still in the box, untouched. I finally picked them up, the cool metal of the pencils a small comfort. I started to sketch, not a landscape, not a design, but my father's face as I last saw it, the look of pure, unadulterated pain. My hand shook as I drew, the lines coming out rough and uneven, but it was honest. I wrote a letter. I started it a dozen times, each draft more pathetic than the last. Finally, I just wrote from the heart. I apologized for my cruelty, for my anger, for my ignorance. I told him I finally understood. I sealed the envelope and walked to the post office. The cold air felt cleansing. I was taking a step, a tiny one, towards a future I wasn't even sure existed. Back in my apartment, I sat in the silence, waiting for a phone call that might never come. I had no one to blame but myself. My bitterness had been a cage, and I had been the one holding the key, refusing to open the door and let in the light. The humiliation I had inflicted on my father was a public spectacle, but the humiliation I now faced was a private, gut-wrenching pain. I had achieved my revenge, and it had left me utterly, devastatingly alone. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, the face of a woman who had won the battle but lost the war. It was a long, hard road ahead, and I wasn't even sure where to begin.